Hello and welcome to Web of Light. I am here today with my co-host, Lori Powers Otto, and I'm Dr. Kevin. Lori, how are you?
I'm wonderful, Dr. Kevin. How are you today?
You know, I'm hanging out at fabulous, but I'm trying to see if I can get to fantastic.
Oh.
You know, I'm trying to move my way through the alphabet.
I like it.
Yeah, you know.
I like
so,
it.
One of the things that I want to talk about today actually is something that's near and dear to my heart, and I'm going to start with our quote right off the bat.
Okay.
Which the quote that I found, and I'm doing something really tacky, which is I'm pulling up my phone because I was trying to memorize it at the last minute and I failed. And I didn't get it printed, so it can't be part of the clipboard series,
Right.
for our summer series. There is no author to this, so I apologize. I found it, but I can't locate who actually said it originally. We are all part of the web of light that illuminates the world.
Perfect.
We are all part. As you've been part of the Web of Light Expo
Yes.
for the last 2 years, you'll be also joining us in 2019.
Yes, absolutely.
The last weekend in April, we'll be doing the spring. And then we're going to be doing one in the fall. We're going to be doing one, a fall equinox.
Oh, very nice. Very nice.
So that's going to be, I think, the 14th and 15th. It's the weekend just before the equinox we do it. So we're going to start to do that. We're going to be doing them both here in Nashua at the Courtyard Marriott.
Nice.
Feeling like that this would be a good energy to
Yeah, definitely. I like that.
kind of balance things out. So hopefully we'll see you there as well.
Yeah.
You know you'll be invited.
Absolutely.
But I don't think I ever told you about how I came up with Web of Light, did I?
No, you have not.
So on one of the other shows, I talked about how my grandmother talked to me when I was 4 about being psychic. And then I did some professional psychic work as a teenager, working with the New England Traveling Psychics and Ramona Garcia. You knew Ramona.
Yep, I did.
Who has passed now, but she was definitely one of our latter half of the 20th century spiritual, pathfinders in this area.
Absolutely. She was just an amazing lady.
Yes, I met Ramona in the 70s, still as a teenager, along with some other notables who have all since found their way on their journey. But I did the practical stuff and got my degrees and went back, got a very strong message that I needed to go back to my roots in around the time I turned 30. And I knew that meant leaving the corporate world behind.
Never an easy decision.
No.
But I'm glad I made it. I'm glad you made it.
Yeah. We've both made that decision. And so when I came out of left Virginia, left a corporate position, secretary, car phone when they were like big and you had to take them in and out and there were boxes.
Yeah, I had one in a bag. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, I got you.
That kind. And doing all of that, and settling back in, I put a very business spin on it. We've chatted a little bit about this down then. It's like, okay, well, if I'm going to start a spiritual business, it's a business, and it's going to have a business plan and a marketing plan, and how do I do this, and what do I do, and blah, blah, blah. And so I had set some goals, and my first business partner was Dara, that you've heard me talk about before. And when we met at the Mustard Seed, which was a herb store that was around for, I think, about 22, 23 years in downtown Portsmouth. And it has moved now out to, I think it's Nottingham. It's in Nottingham now, but it was right in downtown Portsmouth. And it was definitely another one of those cutting edge places.
Right.
Doing things. And that's where I met Dara, and we decided to start teaching classes together. And I had a goal. And my goal was And I said to her, I sat around her kitchen table. I can still remember the conversation, looking at her, my partner at the time, her husband at the time, and saying within a year, I wanted to be in an office in downtown Portsmouth. I wanted to have a secretary. I wanted, I said I wasn't going to do back alleys. I wasn't going to do flashing neon palms. That what I was doing with my psychic abilities was every bit as professional.
Yeah.
And I was going to treat it like a profession, and I expected to be treated professionally, for which I got a ton of blowback through the years on.
Yeah, I can understand that, but
yeah. So fast forward, the year has come and gone. I have an office in downtown Portsmouth, 1 Middle Street, sharing it with architects and lawyers and all sorts of other people, some who became my first clients as a spiritual coach, counselor, and catalyst. And then I got the message to go on the road. And I was standing in my office on 1 Middle Street. I was facing the only door on the second floor to get in. There was windows that looked looked down at Portsmouth Health Food Store. Mm-hmm. You know where I'm talking about?
Yep.
Sitting right there. And I heard a voice behind me. And of course, there was nobody else in the office. And I recognized it as what I call the voice of God.
Okay.
And it said that I needed to sell everything and go on the road. That's where I was needed. And
talk about having to take a leap of faith.
And I was really like, you're kidding. At that point, I was living in a beautiful house right on the water in Kittery. I could walk to my office. I had a relationship that was kind of limping along, but I didn't know if it was coming to a close or if it was just in one of those phases relationships hit. I was making a full-time living, which I was told I would not be able to do as a spiritual practitioner. And I had a good life, and now I was being told to sell everything and go on the road, to fold all of this stuff down and to have faith. And I'm not saying that I didn't struggle with it.
Right.
I'm not saying I didn't have a few words. If you don't have a God you can have words with, you need to get rid of them and find one that can. There are plenty out there, and they're all looking for converts. You always want to have a God you can have dialogue with.
Right.
So, but what I was told I was going to be doing was I was going to go out into the world and create a web of light. And for 2.5 years full time, I lived out of a car. And I went to Biloxi, Mississippi, and I went to Sandpoint, Idaho, and I went to Niceville, Florida. I went to all these little places before the internet.
Right. That's what people need to understand. This is pre-internet. This is a big deal.
This is a big deal. We're talking 1994. I'm going out there with a laptop from Radio Shack, one of the first people that put out a laptop.
Right.
And created the website weboflight.com 1994. And there weren't a lot of websites. Most people didn't even know what websites were at that point.
Right.
But going to these places where people were being treated badly, they would picket them for classes they would try to teach. They would be ostracized. They'd be punished. And I would come in as the spiritual teacher and tell them there are other people out there.
Right. You're not alone.
And I taught, and I had faith for 2.5 years that there would always be another invitation to someplace else. And in 2.5 years, I can count the number of nights I had to spend in a hotel. I never missed a bill. I had a brand new car. And I put 90,000 miles in the first 1.5 years, I think.
That's what happens when you trust spirit. Things get taken care of.
Yep. And so I weave that web of light.
And thank you. Thank you for doing that.
Oh, well, you're welcome.
That took guts. That took courage and faith.
And it did, yeah. And I actually taught at some UU churches, some Unity churches, some spiritual churches. I actually taught a sermon that I'd be invited to teach on faith. What is faith?
Nice.
And so I bring all of this up because in a little bit, I'm going to be sharing an interview I did with Andy Negu, who is the founder of Spectrali, who has created an organization in Europe that is going to be coming to the US as well. And in talking with him, it was amazing. Here was a young man in his 20s who had already started up and was having 2 successful companies, and met a spiritual person that touched his life. And suddenly he became ravenously hungry for spirituality.
Nice.
And then started Spectrali to help weave a web of light in the world.
Nice. That's how God brings like-minded people together.
Yep. And so Andy was one of our silver sponsors. Did you ever get a chance to actually meet Andy?
I did not.
Oh.
Because, with as busy as I was and as busy as he was, there was not an opportunity. But we're going to have to change that next time.
Yes, we will change that. Because Spectrali and Web of Light have decided to dance together because we have very mutual statements of what we want to do in the world. So I want to share that. But before we do that, where do you in the world feel like light most needs to be woven? And what message do you have to people who feel like they're here to be weavers, but don't know how to do it?
Well, that's a very broad question.
I know.
But where I think people need to start weaving the web of light is with themselves. And I'm writing about this in a book I'm writing. Because when you learn to love yourself, listen to yourself, trust yourself, you naturally begin to spread that love and light and trust out to others. And it helps build stronger families, stronger communities, stronger cities, states, I could go on and on. But it starts with yourself. So that's where I always start any student, client that comes to me, is weaving the web of light first with themselves. Because the one person I found that most people love the least is themselves.
Okay. And what would you say to somebody who feels like they're here to be a weaver?
Do it. Do it. Start with yourself and start spreading out. And don't be afraid to spread that love and that light. It can be easy. It doesn't have, some people get overwhelmed with the scope of it. They think, they have to solve all the world's problems overnight to spread love and weave that web of light. And you don't. Start small. Holding a door for a stranger weaves that web of light, because then that stranger may pay that act of kindness forward, and then that person pays it forward, and that person pays it forward, and then all of a sudden everybody's doing acts of kindness.
Mm-hmm. That makes me think, when Jeff and I went on our honeymoon in Curacao, we got there and we, started chatting to the people behind the front desk and the tour guide, people that did the tour guides, and our waitresses and our waiters and the bartenders. And we just, and we'd be chatting, and the guy behind the bar, wants to have his own business. And so if it was slow, we'd talk a little bit about some stuff that I teach when I teach entrepreneurs, because I have done business classes, taught business classes for entrepreneurs. And there was a waitress, and she was, really getting her spiritual path underneath. And we talked about that. And there was another one who talked about, we talked about where she wanted to go with her, her career and her choices, and how she was trying to turn a tragedy of her younger brother, being abused into her going out to become a social worker to change the world.
Right, right. See? But you started that web of light by just showing kindness.
When we left, the bartender, by the time we were there the second or third day, every day would create a new drink for us based on talking to us. We didn't ask him to do it.
Right, right.
We had this wonderful waitress, an older woman whose son had flown in, because there's a lot of connection between, because Curacao used to be part of the Dutch Antilles, and her son was working in a fairly high level position and was home visiting his mom, came in. She brought him over to meet us.
Nice. Very nice.
So I'm chatting with this guy who's like a vice president of a communication company in Holland, and we're just chatting, and he looks at me and he goes, I don't know what you did to my mother, but she's been talking about you and how happy you make her all the time. And I was just like, oh my. I was like, all I'm doing is taking an interest.
Right.
Asking a question.
Right.
When we left Curacao, we got going away gifts from the staff, handmade cards.
Aww.
Several of them ended up being on Facebook. I still hear from them. I saw pictures of babies, and all of this stuff. And it can be that simple.
Right, because you're not in it for the going away gifts. You're in it to just be nice and to make a connection and show an interest in somebody. But see, they paid it back to you, but now they're paying it forward to other people because they see that it's okay.
I figured out that, it's a tourist place. They're working at a all-inclusive. And at some point during the week, I just stopped and I was observing, and I was watching how many people treated them like they were invisible.
Isn't that sad?
And then I realized, no wonder they think I'm weird.
Yeah, see, I can't do that. Everybody deserves respect.
Yeah. So we're going to go do the interview with Andy. We'll be back in a few minutes. But before we do that, actually, because the interview is not nearly as long as some of the classes we've been sharing, at what was the defining moment when you recognized that your calling was to be what I call a weaver of light in the world? What's that defining moment for you, Lori?
What was that defining moment? I think it was when, I was very sick for a very long time. And there was nothing, it wasn't anything terminal, but I wasn't ever going to get better. And there was nothing the doctors could do to help me. And so one of my doctors, an MD, sent me to get Reiki, which I'd never heard of, didn't know what it was, whatever, but at this point I'm willing to try anything. Mm-hmm. And as I realized that I was getting better, I realized there had to be more. So I started searching for the more. And that's when I went back to school, got my PhD, became a reverend, did all of that because I wanted to deepen my relationship with God, my relationship with myself, my relationship with everything, everybody, everything. And I know people think I'm weird. I talk to trees, I talk to rocks, I talk to furniture. They all talk back. Because it's all energy. Mm-hmm. But if that doctor had not sent me to get Reiki, I don't know. I know that at some point, God would have gone, wake up! But luckily, I listened the first time, and it was a gentle awakening, not a... Yeah. But I wanted to be able to share that with everybody else.
It is so often, I know that in my journey, the journey you shared, And so often in the journey of my students and my clients that I've done through the years, that there was a dark cave and somebody got pushed out and saw the light and got on the other side and then took that torch, went back into the cave to help lead the other people out.
Right.
Because now they came with the light. So we're going to go talk to, see the little interview I did with Andy of Spectrali, which is a European-based company that is getting ready to make its presence known in the U.S. I guess it's only fair since I've made my presence known in Europe. I guess, you know.
There you go.
Hey. And we'll be right back. Hello and welcome to a Web of Light special. I'm Dr. Kevin and I'm here at the Web of Light Expo, and we're actually wrapping the expo down. So you have missed it for 2018, but what you will not miss is a chance to meet a very interesting young man who is actually my silver sponsor this year, who is the founder of a company called Spectrali. And we're going to talk about it a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit about his journey, but its tagline is "It's in your destiny." And I have the pleasure of introducing Andy Nagu.
Yes, that's correct.
Andy Nagu. Andy, so you're originally from?
So I was born in Romania and now I'm living in Finland.
And you're living in Finland. I've never been to Finland, so you can invite me over now.
Definitely.
I see.
You're
Okay.
welcome.
Do you see how that works?
Even the audience, if they come to Finland or if they pass by or something, they can hit us up and we can arrange some kind of a meetup or something there.
Okay. So one of the things is, I'm not even sure, how did you find out about the Web of Light Expo? Because you just suddenly reached out to me out of nowhere, and it was so close to the end of the expo that I was like, yeah, we can make this work. But so how did you hear about the Web of Light?
Exactly from the nowhere. So basically I was just chatting with a friend that it would be awesome to go to one of these events to try to push our product into the market more, and for me personally to learn more about the market itself, because I've never been to these events. So I was just Googling all the events which are happening in the United States in the next 2018, like the whole year. There were a lot of them, of course, but most of them had small attendees. So I was thinking, like, if I'm still worth like paying a lot to travel this much, waste time, so it needs to be big events or something which is more interesting for us. And looking around, I found a top 5 which got my interest, including yours. So I checked the backs, like the history and everything, and it was really interesting. So that's when I started to email all of those 5. And the ones who are like the most the interesting to me was you.
Yeah.
You were really interested in the product and interesting in innovative new technologies and everything which can be applied into spirituality. So here we are.
Well, you know, and it's interesting from the standpoint of course, the first thing I did is when you contacted me, is I said, okay, late in the game, somebody from Europe I've never heard from, and as you know, I've done business in Europe and things like this, and I said, I understand the culture, at least the cultures I've experienced. I know that they're not all identical, certainly, but there is a European culture in general versus an American culture. But then I thought, or is this a scam artist? I was like, because this came so quick and out of nowhere. So one of the things I did was because I researched, I looked it up. I responded to you, but I looked it up and I looked and I said, oh, I like this. This works. Yep, I can see this. Then I researched you a little bit. I saw you'd done a lot of interesting things, and that's when I first noticed we also had a mutual friend on Facebook.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, so he's a real person. This is a real thing. So let's make it move forward and see where it goes. You know, last year we actually, in our first year, we had 2 mediums from Dublin, Ireland, who came and did the show.
Okay.
that popped across, and we created a whole little mini tour for them to come over, and they did the show, and they blah 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 blah. So we've 2 years in a row we've hosted somebody from the other from the other side of the pond, as they like to say, across the pond.
So tell me a little bit. So first of all, the name is fascinating, and I know I've got people out there that are saying, is that because you said, is that a Romanian word or is that a Finnish word? Well, it's a word that came to a Finnish, but it's not a Finnish word.
Yes,
So
and
explain that.
It's not even complete yet. The idea is to, we started with a concept behind it, like, okay, we want to be a technology company, but also have a very spiritual name. The idea behind it is people to identify themselves with Spectrali as a brand.
Okay.
So when we researched on it and we had a couple of names, we asked people from different cultures, from Spanish cultures, English cultures, and so on, to try to identify and think what do they think about this name? Like, does it sound correct, or is it pronounced fine? Can you pronounce it even to a friend or something? And of course, the ones who were the kind of rated a very good name were in the Spanish-speaking cultures, and then of course the English one. But this is a question which I asked you even before this show. That what do you think about it? From my point of view, I love it. It kind of got to me when I first saw it. From the beginning, I knew there's something about it, and even though I wanted the confirmation from people, I kind of put my bet on it already before that.
So you listen to your own intuitive.
Yeah, I do actually.
Good man, good man. We like that. That goes over well on this show.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, just kidding. But really, I am.
No, I'm serious. It goes over well.
Yeah, I am. I'm serious. I was listening to the idea that I loved it from the beginning. About the logo, though, the logo was came out like from the Spectrali of the spectrum kind of thing, but it's more like a Stracoda, if I'm pronouncing it correct. Like, I was working with a designer for 2 months to understand what is it about, and it's like trying to be an incomplete world or Earth, which has all the elements from the earth, wind, fire, water, and we try to put it together into kind of a symmetrical shape.
Well, it's very interesting because there's a few different things, and when I look at it from here, I'm looking at it at a slightly different angle, and then I can look over and I can see it from a distance, because we're looking at a screen. We're here at the Courtyard Marriott in Nashua, New Hampshire, where we just finished the 2-day Web of Light Expo, and one of the things is. So, I mean, it looks to me like it. First thing I look at it from a distance is it looks like it's a very stylized Star of David.
Yeah, we got this a lot at the beginning. Yeah, and indeed, it might be going there a bit, but that's not what it is.
Well, and there's an interesting energy behind that, because first of all, there is, in a lot of different spiritualities and a lot of different cultures, 3 seems to be a mystical number.
Yes.
And and you have it, and it pops up in again a number of different religions and belief systems. The power of 3, and that energy, whether it's the power of 3 in Wiccan and threefold, or it's the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Kind of energy. And so I look at that, and you have each one of these has 3 out, and then 1 as if this is me, like going somewhere. And in the logo, it looks to me like an expanding Star of David. And I know you said that it's not, but as somebody who's had a ton of Jewish lifetimes. Not having one this lifetime, though some people have thought so. I've been asked many times if I'm Jewish. There is something about the Jewish faith because it's a living faith. And there's a difference between living faiths and dead faiths. The dead faith kind of says, well, this is the way it is. It was said, it doesn't change. You kind of live with it, and it does not evolve. But man evolves. And in Judaism, every generation of new scholars question and reinterpret, can man understand the nature of God better because man has come father?
Right, okay.
Are you familiar with that concept in Judaism?
Not too much, but now it sounds interesting.
Okay. And so I bring that up because I always say that, you know, God is growing because we're growing, because we're part of God.
Right.
And so as we grow, we expand God because we now also have more that we can conceptualize God with. So when I look at your logo, and it strikes me as this expanding Star of David that doesn't come together and actually quite connect, to me, it's the evolving spirituality of God. And of course, we have the S in the middle, which is for Spectrali, but it's the evolving spirituality of God, Spirit, whichever one, Spirit, let's say Spirit, because it's an S, and that this next generation is going to do it through technology.
Right. That is more like, yeah, it might be that deep in our minds, like the gut feeling or something about this logo kind of pushed me into that direction, but of course you interpret it very well.
Well, you know, at some point it may cross your awareness, may or may not, you know, you're a hungry brain, Andy, is that some of the power of the mystical symbols is because they're in all of our collective unconscious. So there is a part of you that's had some Jewish lifetimes. There's part of you that have done some of these battles before. And so when this came up, it spoke to you on a level that just felt right.
Exactly.
Because it was there.
That's about intuition I just mentioned.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about Spectrali, and then tell us a little bit about Andy.
Okay. So Spectrali. Well, let me start with what if I start with myself first, so you can know how I got into this.
No, absolutely not. I have no flexibility. I'm a control freak. Do it my way.
Okay. So yeah, for me, I started my first company at 18 years old. So exactly when I got legally allowed to open a company. I'm a college dropout, if you can imagine. Probably my parents don't even know this, and I hope they don't see this, but yeah, I just couldn't focus in college. I was just trying to learn, but I was learning a lot for YouTube, like people who are more entertaining, like teaching me in a more entertaining way. But
you must love my classes then.
yeah, for sure. That's why I was attending them actually.
Go ahead.
Okay, so for those who are coming to next year, maybe they should check it out.
And meet Andy.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so what I was saying, okay, yeah, the college thing. I started the company. I kind of managed to create a base of clients with that. We were selling more like Amazon, actually. We have Amazon in the States.
Yes.
So we were doing basically an Amazon in Europe, but a very small one in one city only, not in the entire continent. And it grew pretty well. Then I needed another challenge. Like I could not stick. I got bored very fast about it. Plus, I was thinking that I don't know. I think I can do bigger things than just stay in one city and do something there. And I met some friends. We started a company which was monetizing time per minute to clients anywhere in the world. The company is called Minutizer. It's still out there, but it's doing on a general rule to everything, basically, like to telemedicine, education, and so on, any kind of field. But then we got a lot of people approaching us on the spirituality industry, so like on esoteric, and that's how we got, okay, whoa, I didn't know even about this industry. I am personally a spiritual world. I'm more like an agnostic person. Like I believe that there is a higher self. I don't know exactly what or how to call it or what to say it. My parents are Christians, and they're saying that it's, of course, God in three shapes. I respect that, but I didn't really felt really okay, because I respect also the one in Asia who is praying to Hindu or Buddhism. So it's like I got interested in this, and then I thought that maybe this needs a separate name for it. It cannot stay with everything in one place. It's a bit more higher than just education. Of course, they're all important and they all correlate.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that a strategy from a business point of view was to just kind of take it apart, put it in a different marketplace, give it a name, give something a bit bigger meaning to it.
So this is like one of those, you know, you have the diamond or the crystal in the center, and you have these different facets, but depending on where you're standing and where you're looking, facets can be like a mirror.
Yeah.
And so the face you see, you want people to see, is the one that reflects back to them that is familiar.
Exactly. Yeah.
And for some of your clients, the spiritual face, doesn't actually look at as something that would be translatable to your maybe your medical face or your business face,
Right.
whatever. So I understand that that doing that, you don't want people to look at a face that's unfamiliar and say, oh yeah, this can't be for me.
Yeah.
So I get that. You define yourself as agnostic. How do you define agnostic?
Well, this is the idea. I think it's really difficult to define. So I guess for me it was more like the most common or the most comforting word, and to express my my belief system, let's say, because there's no word for it. It's so difficult. I try to find it, but there's, at least I don't know if there is. Maybe my spirituality culture is pretty low, I guess. That's why I came here, to learn more. So I see that basically, let's say my philosophy from the beginning is that we all pray to the same thing, but each culture, each country has its own kind of a name or representation of that God, so it can fit their culture. That's why Christianity didn't manage to, let's say, convince the Muslim population nowadays to be Christian. They needed Mohammed to do that. And the same, it's like in all the other places. Like if you go to Asia, for example, which is a fascinating place, I love it. There's like a lot of this good energy is coming there, and I don't know how to define that. It's just the people are amazing. They're just polite, very kind, very friendly.
And so we're going to use the same analogy. That face has to look familiar. Why? I love it that we have there's a musical that was a lot of fun that was on Broadway for a while called Avenue Q, and in one of the songs in Avenue Q, two characters get in a fight with whether Jesus was black or white, and the third character comes in and said, Jesus was Jewish, and the first two just laugh at them, because people who are Christian, if you're white, you need a white Jesus. If you're black, you need a black Jesus, because how can you be of something that isn't familiar or doesn't look like you,
Right.
unless somehow there's a differential there. So it's interesting. So you're just talking about, like before we were talking about the many faces of Spectrali, the many faces of God, whatever you choose to call it.
Right.
So it's interesting. Because I for a long time would identify as agnostic, which says, yeah, there's something, I just don't think I've found a definition I like yet. I'll give you one when I'm ready. So then I created my own. That's what we do.
Right.
Right? So how did that journey, as you started dealing with spiritual people, lead to Spectrali? And tell us more of what Spectrali is.
Right. So dealing with a lot of spiritual clients, or let's say users from our platform, I got into it like more curious, let's say. I started to read about the industry, and then I found out about tarot and everything. Like I had no idea before that. At least in Europe, maybe in my region, this was really never heard. Or I was maybe for sure in a bubble, which was not popped yet by nothing like this. So reading on about the industry and everything, what is this about, about the people who are providing these services, got me really hooked and interested. And then talking with a couple of them, I realized that this is actually something in here. So yeah, that's when I decided actually to create a marketplace where everyone can get a spiritual consultation, let's say, because at least in developed societies, there's a lot of depression, anxiety, and all this stuff. People need guidance, and that's why I decided this could be a different stuff, totally different thing, a bigger thing than just another marketplace. It needs to be a spiritual healing place. So to continue on what Spectrali is, it's basically a place where you can find your guidance, and for the ones who provide the guidance, it's a place where they can help other people find
So
it.
it's a platform.
Right, yeah.
It's a platform where you can match up people offering spiritual services to people seeking them.
Right.
Now, are you limiting it to services? I believe I saw something that made me think at some point you might actually get into classes or other offerings.
Yeah, so at this time, if you go to spectrali.com, you will find only the services, like the offerings. But in the future, in the near future, we're planning to create even a kind of a shopping part where you can actually buy specific products, and then classes as well to get this kind of education and to
Online education.
right.
Well, you're working in an interesting platform, and of course, Americans are terribly limited in their linguistic abilities. We only learn one language. There's no requirement. Europe, you know, your teenager. My experiences, what I've heard, and my experiences in Europe, you know, you get by the time you're a teenager, you're speaking anywhere from 2, 3, up to 5 languages.
Right, yeah, it is like that because being a multicultural, for example, in schools, it's mandatory to know at least 2 foreign languages, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Well, yeah, in the time I spent in Switzerland, I was the woman that was my promoter at the time in Europe. I stayed with her family, and you know, and there were her kids, and they were delighted to be able to practice English with somebody who was an American, because they practiced English with an Englishman, and it was different. It was a different language.
It is, yeah.
And then I get to practice English with somebody that was there, and they would go back and forth between the languages. And I've always said that it's just a shame that we're so arrogant in this country, because if you start a kid at 3, 4, or 5, they can pick up 2 or 3 languages really easy.
Yeah, exactly.
Instead of offering it to them when they start in, so you have to take 2 years of a language in high school. Really?
And yeah, talking about this, Switzerland actually has 3 languages which are mandatory, like Italian, German, and French. So that's even a different level there.
And English is not mandatory in Switzerland. I thought it was actually.
No, well, they learn it in schools and everybody's good at it, but it's not an official language.
Well, I was in Curacao for my honeymoon, and they have 4 languages, official languages that
Really?
all kids have to learn.
Whoa.
Yeah, because they also have to learn Dushi. Not Dushi. What is it called? Palmetto. Dushi is actually. I'm wearing a shirt. Dushi means it's an interesting word because it means sweet. But if you call a person douchey, you're calling them your sweetheart.
Okay.
So it's a word that has this kind of little thing on it. But yeah, I was like, they have to learn the Palmetto, which is a combination of the Dutch and the German, and with some English and a little bit of Spanish thrown in, because at different times it was a colony ruled by all those different cultures, and in wars they fought back and forth. They became a multilingual culture. So, and the whole reason I brought this up is, would there be a translation service available?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, so actually another thing which I need to mention about this is that we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We're using Skype. So the Skype is basically connected to our platform to monetize the call, and to take care of it, to know how much you're spending in the call, and you know everything about your calls with your clients. But in the same time, Skype has a lot of other services. First of all, it's encrypted. So all the conversation is completely private. Nobody has access to it. No Microsoft, no, not us. Only you and your client. And another thing is that they have this real-time translation service. So that means that you can talk with a client in China or wherever in the world in your own native languages, both of you. You can see each other via video. You can speak audio, and he hears it in his own language, and that's amazing. This is the power of technology, bringing people and spirituality together.
Beam me up, Scotty. Sounds like a Star Trek episode to me. The universal translator.
Yeah, it is there. It is there. Skype has made it.
Yeah. So that is very interesting. I was not aware that the translation service was so, because I, after doing work in France and Switzerland, and meeting people who they were trying, that would do work with me, but English wasn't their native language, they would sometimes recommend people. I would do somebody over Skype.
Yeah.
From here, I still have clients in Europe that I do, and things like this. But definitely the English would be a little bit of them trying to make that change depending on where they came from. And I don't speak any other languages but English.
Yeah.
I have been accused by my staff of talking Dr. Kevinisms, but I don't think that's
You
an
have your
official
own
language. Well, you know, all of us who have ADD, ADHD do have our own language.
True
It just is. So you're going to do some. So I got a question for you.
Yeah.
So years ago, I created a game which I created in paper. I literally created it, printed it, cut up the pieces, things like this, to be a board game about how to learn astrology and understand it by applying it to your life.
Okay.
And it's in a paper bag. I never had it produced. And a few years ago, I said, at some point, I want to turn it into an online game that you could play, where people would kind of understand the concepts. And so it was a combination of a fun board game, only now it would be an online game.
It has an education twist to it.
Has an education twist to it. So I'm just using that as an example. Is that something that Spectrali would be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, we are not building necessarily like games in Spectrali, but we are definitely looking into any kind of partnerships which have the same vision or mission as we have. So in order to connect people together, educate them, and create a more spiritual world, that kind of fits to it. So in this case, I would say there is a possibility. We need to see how that can be applied and how is it possible to make it.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. I mean, I do some online teaching now. I work through a platform and do some online teaching. It's interesting. At first I didn't think I was going to like it because I'm really a lot about the connection.
Yeah.
But I've got to the point now where, because I've done so much stuff and do phone stuff and do Skype stuff, that now online teaching is just, yeah, it's like, yeah, okay, yeah, I can do an online teaching. So I think it is a very up and coming thing. It's interesting. It's an interesting thing. If you're connected enough, you can connect no matter where you are.
Welcome back. A very interesting young man. And, you know, one of the things is, I do think that there is a growing number of younger people that are getting it sooner. Do you think that that's true? Is that you experiencing
I
that?
absolutely am seeing it in my grandchildren, in my clients, in my students. The younger generations are getting it faster. They're embracing it more fully, and they are weaving the web of light. It's just an amazing thing to observe and be part of.
I think it's interesting. I almost have to wonder if we had not let the world get to the precipice of so much self-destructiveness, would we have this generation being so enlightened, seeming to come in, get it, know it, or, you know, reach for it? Oftentimes on my radio show, on the Dr. Kevin show, I will start with I call it a hot topic. And
Right.
a hot topic either, you know, makes me feel warm and fuzzy in the heart or gets me hot under the collar. We never know which one. Depends on what I pick. But I've been finding a lot of great stories lately of kids 15, 17, even in their early 20s that are doing these incredible things to change the world.
Right.
Doing these incredible reach outs. And the funny thing is you have to go looking for those stories.
Right. They should be breaking news. They should be the first thing and the last thing you see on the news every day instead of just all the negative.
How different would the world be if the headlines was about, the group of seniors that I talked about, or the group of high school students who get together and have created a food kitchen for the homeless and actually sit with them and find out what their stories are. And they've been going for like 3 years now, feeding all these homeless. And they started as like freshmen in high school, and they have this thing where they do that. What if that was on the front page? What if it was on the front page about this young girl who has figured out how to take some of the waste dumps and turn them into plantable land where you get clean food out of, or all of these other stories? If young kids that were feeling disempowered and lost and angry and disenfranchised, if they saw those, would they be picking up a pencil instead of a gun?
Right. I think they would. I think they would realize that they can make a difference, that they do matter, that they're important.
And they wouldn't have to say, that old, one moment in time. How often the thing you'll find or whatever is, I'm going to be known as this shooter, or I'm going to be like, they're looking for something that means that their life had mattered.
Well, that they existed.
That they existed. And of course, the line between famous and infamous is
very thin.
Very thin. If you feel like you're drawn to be a weaver of a web of light in the world, if you feel like the world needs more light and a greater recognition of connectedness would make the world a kinder, gentler, and more loving place, then there are very simple things you can do. As Lori suggested, you can start by becoming more interconnected within yourself. Bring light into your own shadows and your own corners and your own places where you are self-abusive, where you're self-dismissive, where you feel like you shouldn't be proud. Speak out. Make a difference in the world. Illuminate those. See what they're about. Clean them out. Blow out the cobwebs. And then start by very simple actions. Hold the door open. I have a thing that I always do whenever I go to a restaurant. I insist on knowing my waiter or waitress's name, and I always use it.
Yes.
Because I want them to know that they're being seen. Sometimes the difference between a child or an adult who may end their life or somebody else's, or may go on to save lives or bring light to the world, can be a simple act of kindness. Namaste.